Well, I'm joined now by Mark Gettleson from the Howard League for Penal Reform, and also by Max Chambers, who's Head of Crime and Justice at the right-wing think tank, the Policy Exchange. Good to have you both on the programme tonight. And Mark, let's start with you. I know you support this report, but if you had been a victim of crime, would you be so supportive? What do you think?
Yeah, I've been the victim of both theft and of fraud in the past. You check on a bank statement, you realise your card has been used. I think mine had been used in Egypt, and I went through my bank's internal fraud checks. And my most important thing that I felt at the time was, I want my money back. And too infrequently do victims of crime, where they've had their property taken, get their property back and get compensated. So for us, that's what needs to be prioritised.
But if your house had been burgled and that person didn't go to jail, how would you feel?
Yeah, we, like Professor Ashworth, don't actually consider burglary to be a pure property offence. But if I was running a shop and someone kept shoplifting from my shop, the number one thing I'd want was some kind of compensation. I'd want the stuff they'd taken back or some kind of financial compensation. But secondly, I'd want to find the best way of stopping them doing it again. And that is very unlikely to be through a short-term prison sentence, for which the reoffending rate is about 60%.
Max Chambers, I suppose if no one's physically hurt, is jail a bit too heavy-handed, do you think, for thieves and fraudsters?
Well, I think what we have to recognise is that property crimes are already treated pretty leniently by the criminal justice system, so you're far more likely to receive an out-of-court disposal like a caution or a community sentence than you are a prison sentence for a property crime already.
Look at those statistics that we just showed, that the female prison population would go down by 20-something%. That's extraordinary,
Absolutely,
isn't it?
But the other thing that's important here is that prison is largely reserved already for serious or persistent offenders when magistrates have run out of road with a particular offender. So the kinds of punishments that Mark is talking about, community punishments, fines, compensation orders, very often for this cohort of people have been tried time and time again and have been shown not to work. So I think the idea of saying you cannot in any circumstances use prison is completely the wrong approach. It fetters judicial discretion and it fails to protect the public from harm as well.
It's a good point there, isn't it?
Well, I actually agree with a lot of what Max just said around...
So is there evidence that fines work or community services work? So these people who are reoffending constantly?
Yes, there is a large amount of evidence out there that community sentences are a lot more effective. And I think the important point that Max raised is that short-term prison sentences for people who commit theft are a sign of failure. We shouldn't be sending people to prison for these kinds of crimes. We should instead be investing in better community sentencing. If, for instance, someone keeps stealing from a shop to fuel their drug habit, we should ensure there's proper drug treatment out there in the community.
Now, we've been speaking to one ex-offender. Let's listen to what he had to say.
You can't say to people, if you're going to go out and commit crime, you're not going to go to prison, because that would just encourage people to go out and commit more crime, knowing there's no punishment at the end of it.
So that gentleman agrees with prison, but Max Chambers, is expensive, isn't it? I mean, how would you fund it? Build more prisons? Is that your answer?
Well, prison is very expensive. The problem with the fact that so many people who commit theft have short prison...
So what's your answer, basically?
Well, I think we have to allow magistrates and judges to retain the discretion to use short prison sentences where they've run out of road with an offender. But what we've suggested, what Policy Exchange has said, is that just because short sentences don't work at the moment doesn't mean that they shouldn't be used. If you make sure that people get the support once they leave prison, so they don't come back into the criminal justice system, that's far more effective than simply saying you cannot, under any circumstances, use a custodial sentence.
OK, gentlemen, we have to leave that there, I'm afraid. Mark Gettleson and Max Chambers, thanks for your time tonight.